Once upon a time, in a distant village at the east of Africa, suffering has been the first plague the people of Bobaka suffered. They will cultivate their farms during farming season, but during harvest, sadness endorses the air in Bobaka. All plants will die off a week before harvest. No matter how much the villagers prayed or worked, their crops would never survive. This causes a big reduction of the population of Bobaka. The air would grow heavy with sorrow and hunger. Hunger took over the village. People grew weaker and weaker. Many have traveled 1,000 miles to survive. Many meet their deaths on the way due to insufficient food to keep them through. Humans and animals died day and night. The villagers were desperate to survive that they did something unthinkable. The people of Bobaka ate the flesh of their dead ones to survive. Everyone in Bobaka was afraid. What had they done wrong to deserve such suffering? They will often ask themselves. The people of Bobaka decided to ask for what was causing their suffering and pain. One night, the village elders, the oldest and wisest people of Bobaka, gathered under a giant tree. They lit a fire and called upon the ancient spirit, begging for answers. A cold wind blew through the trees, and a deep voice echoed in the night.
The village is cursed. Long time ago, a great wrong was done, and now the land suffers. There is only one way to break the curse. The prince of Bobaka must be transformed into a beast and sent to a faraway village where no one knows him. Only if the people there learn to love him will he return as a man. Only then will Bobaka be free from suffering.
The village elders were shocked, as their prince was the only child of their king and queen. When the elders took the prophecy to the palace, the king and queen refused the outright. He was their only heir, their flesh and blood. How could they send him away to an unknown fate? There must be another way, the king and queen had said. The villagers got angry because of the king and queen refusal to send the prince away. They whispered among themselves.
If it was one of us, the king would have agreed immediately.
Yes, but because it is his son, he refuses. We have suffered for too long. The crops die and we have no food. If the God has spoken, then the king must obey.
Their murmurs turned into shouts of frustration. Soon, the whole village, men and women, young and old, both children gathered and marched to the palace, angrily singing and chanting.
Do
Do what the gods have commanded. End our suffering. We no go gree, oh, we no go gree. The prince must go, we no go gree. Do what the gods have commanded. End our suffering. We no go gree, oh, we no go gree. The prince must go, we no go gree.
The king and the queen watched in shock and sadness as the angry villagers filled the palace courtyard demanding justice. Prince Ikenna stepped out and looked at his people. Their faces were thin and their children were weak. He turned to his parents and said, "If this is the only way to save my people, then I will go." The villagers all jumped up for excitement and celebration after hearing what the prince had said. The king and queen tried to change his mind, but Prince Ikenna's mind was made up already. That night, Prince Ikenna transformed into a beast, screaming and waking everybody in the palace up. The palace guards were horrified when they saw that their once beloved prince was now a beast. They tried to stop him, but the beast overpowered them and disappeared into the dark forest beyond the hills. The queen wailed, crying loudly as she watched her only son disappear into the dark. The king, usually strong and proud, now looked defeated as he was trying to hold back his tears from dropping. For many nights, the beasts ran, traveling from one forest to the other. Animals ran at the sight of him as they've never seen such a horrifying being. But the beast was not hunting. He was lost, alone and searching for a place where he could rest. One night, after many days of wandering, he arrived at a small village called Buguka. It was quiet and peaceful. He found a huge tree standing in the center of the village near the marketplace. He decided to rest here as the branches were wide enough to shelter him. For the first time since leaving his home, the beast closed his eyes and slept. One morning, as the first light of the dawn touched the village, a group of women carrying baskets were going to the market to set up their stalls and foodstuffs as they did every day. But as they walked past the huge tree, one of them gasped. "Look! There's something under the tree," she whispered in fear. The others turned and their eyes widened in shock and fear as they saw the huge beast sleeping under the huge tree. They ran back to the village shouting in panic, "A beast! A beast lives under the big tree!" Soon the entire village was talking about it. The elders gathered in fear and thinking. The hunters sharpened their spears, ready to protect the people. The mothers held their children, warning them not to wander around like they used to. They stopped going to the market with the fear that the beast might harm them. Few days later, the villagers began to notice something strange. The beast never attacked anyone. He only left the tree at night, moving silently through the forest, and will return very early in the morning to sleep. He will often wake up whenever the sun rises, because whenever the sun rises, he will become restless, roaring and screaming in pain. The beast feared the sun. He wakes up when it rises, and that is when he becomes restless, the villagers said to themselves. The villagers came up with a plan that they will go to the market very early in the morning to buy and sell before the beast wake up. And so, from that day on, the villagers rushed to the market at dawn. They set up their stores in the dim morning light, sold their goods, and hurried back to their homes before the beast could wake up. Even though they were afraid of him, they realized that as long as they stayed out of his way, he did not harm them. But deep down, they still wondered who was the beast and why was he here. One evening, as the beast laid under the huge tree, he opened his eyes and watched the village from a distance. Every morning while he was still in deep sleep, the villagers came to the market, set up their stores, sold their goods quickly and left before he woke up. At first he didn't care, but as the day passed, he began to feel lonely. He wanted to see the village when it was alive, to hear the chatter of the traders, the giggles of the children and the beating of drums, but he always woke up too late. One night, the beast made a decision that he would no longer go out in the night and come back in the morning. He made up his mind that he would sleep in the night and wake up very early in the morning. That night, instead of wandering in the forest, he stayed under the huge tree and forced himself to sleep. For the first time, he slept through the entire night. The villagers, unaware of the beast's decision, came out very early in the morning to the market as usual. The marketplace was very busy. The air was filled with the sound of traders calling out their prices and the sight of colorful baskets overflowing with yam, pepper, and groundnuts. For the first time, the beast was awake early enough to see it all. He was happy at the sight of what he was seeing. He took a step forward, then another. Just as he was approaching the market, the villagers saw him and they all scattered in panic and all ran away, leaving their goods behind, and some scattered on the floor. The beast watched as the villagers disappeared into their hut, leaving behind their half-sold goods and scattered food. He became sad. They were afraid of him, he had thought. He was about to turn back and leave when something caught his eye. A little girl standing in the middle of the market. She wasn't running. She wasn't screaming. She was just turning and looking around. Her mother had dropped her basket and fled in fear, forgetting the little girl in her panic. The beast was surprised. He took a careful step in order not to scare her. He approached the little girl, and when he got closer to her, she did not scream. She did not run. She just stared at him expressionless. "Why didn't you run like the others?" the beast asked with a deep voice. "I was looking for my mother. We came to the market together," the little girl replied. For the first time in a while, the beast smiled. She looked down at the little girl, still surprised because of how brave she was. He slowly reached out to her and carried her gently and carefully back to the huge tree where he had been sleeping. He asked the little girl what her name was, and she told him that her name was Amaka. The beast asked Amaka if she wanted to hear a story, and she nodded excitedly. And so the beast began to tell her a story. He tried as much as he could to speak in a very calm and gentle way while telling her the story. The little girl listened attentively. She laughed at the funny parts. Meanwhile, in the village, Zuri, the mother of the little girl, was in a state of panic. She had only realized too late that she had left her child behind in the market. Tears filled her eyes as she dragged a few villagers and ran back to the marketplace, her heart pounding. When they arrived, they stopped and stared surprisingly. There, under the huge tree, was the beast and her daughter, but he was not harming her. Instead, Amaka sat comfortably beside him, laughing and listening to whatever he was saying. She looked happy. Zuri's hand trembled, saying she can't go closer. The villagers with her persuaded her to go. But look, he's not harming her, one of the villagers said. Maybe he's not as dangerous as we had thought. Still, Zuru shook her head. She was still afraid to move. Just then, Amaka spotted her mother from afar. With a wide smile, she jumped down and ran towards her. Mama! Mama! She called excitedly. The mother dropped to her knees and hugged her daughter tightly, checking every part of her body to make sure she was unharmed. Are you all right, my child? Didn't the beast harm you? Weren't you afraid? She asked curiously. The little girl giggled and shook her head. No, Mama. He told me the most interesting story. He is not scary at all. The villagers were shocked. They had always believed that the beast was a dangerous creature, but now this small child had sat beside him, unafraid, and even found joy in his presence. The mother tried to convince her daughter to go home with her, but Amaka refused. Mama, I want to hear the full story, she insisted. Zuri pleaded with her daughter, but Amaka still refused. She was determined to stay. At that moment, the beast stood up and slowly approached them. Zuri became so scared. Her first instinct was to run, but she saw the way her daughter looked up at the beast with admiration and decided to stay still even though her heart almost cut. Bring her back tomorrow. I will finish the story, the beast's deep voice came. Without hesitation, Zuri nodded quickly. She grabbed Amaka's hand and hurriedly left the place. As they walked away, the little girl turned back and waved. Goodbye, Mr. Beast, she called cheerfully. By mid-morning, the village was buzzing with whispers. Did you hear? The beast did not harm the child. Some believed it while some shook their heads in doubt. It is impossible. A beast is still a beast, one elder grumbled. But curiosity spread fast. They needed proof. The next day, Azuri led Amaka back to the huge tree. A group of villagers secretly followed behind. They tiptoed carefully, hiding behind trees and huts, peeking from behind baskets and stores. Fear still clung to their hearts, but they had to see for themselves. When they arrived, Amaka's face lit up. Mr. Beast! She called excitedly, running towards him. The beast, who had been waiting patiently, smiled softly and settled down under the huge tree. Without hesitation, he continued the story from the previous day. Zuri, though still nervous, slowly sat beside her daughter Amaka. The villagers hiding held their breath. They expected him to attack, but instead they saw something they never imagined. A massive, terrifying creature telling a story with warmth and passion. They watched the little girl laugh, her mother nodding in interest. One by one, the doubtful villagers stepped out of their hiding places. Some still hesitated, but they saw that the beast did nothing. They inched closer and closer until they were standing right before him. As the story unfolded, their fears melted away. Some even smiled without realizing it. That evening, word spread across the village. The beast was harmless. He was gentle. He only wanted to tell stories. Some still doubted, but curiosity won over fear. More villagers began visiting the huge tree to confirm the truth for themselves. And when they saw him with their own eyes, listening to the deep, enchanting stories that flowed from his mouth, they finally believed. At first, it was just a few children. The little girl had invited her friends, telling them how wonderful the stories were. Soon other children followed. They sat close, listening with wide, eager eyes. Then the adult joined. After long, tiring days, the villagers gathered under the tree every evening to hear the beast's captivating tales. They sat on logs, mats, and even on the ground, forgetting their worries for a while. Sometimes they wished the night would never come, so the story would last forever. But they always had to return home for morning meant another day of work. The villagers no longer feared the beast, but soon they realized he was more than just a storyteller. Wild animals has always been a problem, sneaking into the village to steal livestock and food. But ever since the beast arrived, the animals stayed far away, fearing his presence. He is not just a storyteller. He is our protector, the elders whispered. Filled with gratitude, the villagers brought him gifts, baskets of fruit, roasted meat, handmade beads, and beautiful fabrics. The beast had arrived as an outcast, but now he was one of them. As time passed, Zuri and the beast grew closer. It started with simple conversation after storytelling sessions, then longer talks under the soft glow of the moonlight. On some nights, when the village was asleep, Zuri would sneak back to the huge tree. There the beast would be waiting, his massive form hidden in the shadows. They would sit together side by side, talking about life. One night, as the cool breeze whispered through the trees, Zuri told him about her story. My husband before my daughter was born. It was a brief sickness. One moment he was there and the next he was gone. I was alone. I had to struggle to raise her. Zuri said, her voice heavy with sorrow. The beast's heart ached for her. He had seen pain before, but hearing her story made him feel something he had never felt before. A desire to protect her, to comfort her, to take away her pain. He comforted her and reminded her of how strong she was. And you, who are you really? Zuri asked, looking up at him. The beast always avoided that question. Life happens, he murmured, turning away. But Zuri could see it in his eyes. There was a story behind it. Over time, their bond deepened. She found herself drawn to him in ways she never expected. When she was with him, she felt safe, at peace. He was not just a beast. He was kind, wise, and full of stories that made her heart race with excitement. One night, as they sat together under the silver glow of moon, the beast looked at her jokingly and asked, "Will you marry me?" Zuri chuckled, shaking her head. "I wish I could, but you are a beast." The moment those words left her lips, she realized how true they were, not because he was a beast, but because she wished she wasn't. The beast's heart pounded in his chest. He wanted to tell her that he loved her, that he had never felt this way before, but he feared what she would think. "I don't care what you are. I love you," Zuri whispered. The beast's eyes widened, and for the first time in years, he felt something he thought was long gone: hope. But they knew the truth. The villagers would never accept their love, so they kept it a secret, hidden in stolen moments beneath the moon, in the quiet of the night where only the stars knew the truth. It was a bright sunny afternoon and the villagers gathered under the massive tree. But this time, they weren't listening to stories. They were there to celebrate the beast. Drummers beat their talking drums, their rhythms echoing through the village. Women clapped and danced. Children jumped joyfully, singing his praises. The beast sat among them, watching with pure joy in his heart. He had never felt this loved. The villagers had accepted him, not as a monster anymore, but as one of them. As the celebration reached its peak, a bright light suddenly surrounded him. The drumming stopped. The dancing ceased. The villagers gasped in shock. Then, in a blink of an eye, the beast was no more. Standing before them was a handsome man. A prince, tall, strong, and handsome. The villagers stared in shock. Their beast was a human. The newly transformed prince looked at the stunned face of the villagers and smiled.
I was cursed, and the only way to break the spell was to be truly loved. Because of your kindness, your acceptance, and your love, I am free.
The prince explained. The villagers cheered, realizing their love had changed his fate. Zuri, who had loved him even as a beast, was shocked. He was even more handsome than she had imagined. The prince turned to her, took her hands in his, and smiled.
Now that you see who I really am, will you marry me now?
Tears of joy filled her eyes, and without hesitation she nodded. Yes, I will! The villagers erupted in cheers and singing, their drums beating louder than before. The prince took her bride's hand and together they danced with the villagers, laughing and celebrating. The next morning, the prince knew it was time to return to his kingdom. His mission was complete. The villagers were heartbroken. Many had grown attached to him, and some even cried, not wanting him to leave. But they understood. He had a home and a family waiting for him. As a token of their love, they showered him with gifts, baskets of yams, beads, fine fabrics, and lots more. The prince thanked them all, promising never to forget them. With his bride-to-be and her little daughter by his side, he set off for his kingdom, accompanied by some villagers who wanted to escort him home. As they approached his home village, the people saw him and immediately began to sing and dance. The prince has returned! They shouted with joy. Men, women, and children rushed out to welcome him, throwing flower petals in his path. The talking drums rolled, and the air was filled with celebratory chants. At the palace, the king and queen stood at the entrance, their eyes filled with tears of joy. They had never lost hope, but seeing their son alive and well was a miracle they never expected. The prince knelt before them, his heart full of emotion. I have returned, mother, father. They embraced him tightly, thanking the gods for bringing their only child back to them. The prince then introduced Zuri and Amaka, her daughter. This is the woman who loved me even when I was cursed, and this is her daughter who became my light in the darkest of times. The king and queen welcomed them with open arms, embracing them as part of the royal family. The palace immediately prepared a grand feast, not only to welcome the prince home, but to also celebrate his marriage. Tables were filled with finest food, roasted meat, roasted plantain and yam, different delicious soup and fresh palm wine. The villagers danced, singing songs of love and joy. When the time came, the prince and his bride stood before the elders, exchanging vows. Amaka was so excited, watching as her mother and her new stepfather became one. The prince had once been a cursed beast, wandering in loneliness and sorrow. But because of love, true love, and unconditional love, he found his way home. And in Buguka village, under the same huge tree where he once sat as a beast, people still tell his story to this day. The story of the prince who was loved back into being a human. Bobaka village, which has suffered for so long, finally saw its curse lifted. The land, once barren, now blossomed with fresh crops. The people no longer starved, and the air was filled with laughter instead of sorrow. The villagers rejoiced, thanking the gods, the prince, and the kind-hearted people from the faraway village who had made it all possible. From that day forward, peace and prosperity returned to the land. Prince Ikem now, his new wife Zuri, and his stepdaughter Amaka lived happily ever after. And the story of the cursed beast who found love became a legend told for generations. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe to Hopela Stories.